This week on the WRITERCON podcast,
I would say get as wild and crazy as you want in your first draft. No one's going to see it but you. So who's going to judge it?
welcome to WRITERCON, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Thank you, Jesse Ulrich. We are coming to you live from WRITERCON 2024. And just so you know up front, we are joined today by two of our top keynote speakers, Aprilynne Pike and Kimberly Lemming. Aprilynne and Kimberly are both friends of the podcast. They've been on before, and we are very grateful that they're joining us today, not only for the podcast, but bringing so much to WRITERCON itself. Aprilynne, I remember when we first met, I'm going to say a dozen years ago. It might have been more, but if so, I'm not telling. Anyway, at that conference in Hawaii, I knew that's easy to say after someone's become a #1 New York Times bestseller, but I knew that first day you were going places. But did you suspect that I would drag you to Oklahoma for a writers' conference?
I did not. In fact, I was very skeptical that this is new author, humongous head thing going on. I was skeptical that a YA fantasy author had anything really to learn from a thriller writer. I signed up for a different author,
That's right.
and they got sick, and I got switched into Bill's class, and it was amazing.
Thanks. Kimberly, you've been on the podcast, of course, as I just said, but this is your first time at WRITERCON. Any first or second impressions?
I love it. I want to come back.
Fantastic. How about we can make that happen? Laura, Jesse, how about you? You having a good time?
Having a great time, getting all my steps in, running in between rooms. It's been great.
I am making wonderful connections. We've got a great group of people here. I know I say this every year, but I think this is the best conference we've ever had. I don't know if it's because I'm living it.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's either because I'm living it or because it just gets better and better every year.
Well, let's go with that one. Yeah. and you may have already answered this, but how about you in the audience? Have you learned anything at WRITERCON this year? Yeah, good. I was worried there for a second, but yeah, you bailed me out.
I heard
Good.
one no.
That's right. No. That's what WRITERCON is about. All of you. It's a community of writers joining forces to help one another through what can be the sometimes challenging world of writing and publishing. But the more you know, the better your chances. And that's why we're here. I am very anxious to talk to our two special guests, Aprilynne and Kimberly. But first, the news. First news story. And I titled this just for you, Jesse. Move over, James Patterson.
That's right.
There's a new #1 thriller writer in town, which turns out to be true, although I don't think anybody knew it until the New York Times leaked a story about thriller novelist Freida McFadden, who has now claimed 5 spots on the Hidden Gems list this month, including the #1 spot with her brand new book called The Housemaid is Watching. It's getting a big boost as a result of that New York Times profile I mentioned. Her print books come from Sourcebook, but she's retained the ebook right. Here's the reason why it's a surprise. She's a physician, a practicing physician who treats brain disorders and writes in her spare time, which I'm sure she has tons of. But here's what nobody knew, because she's writing under a pseudonym, because she doesn't want her patients and clients to be confused with writers and readers and all that sort of thing. She is currently the top-selling, best-selling thriller writer in the United States, beating out Baldacci and John Grisham and all the rest. So it's unusual for many reasons. I mean, we always hear about lawyers writing books. That's like a dime a dozen. But physicians, that's more unusual. Laura, does this make you wish that you wrote thrillers or make you wish you'd gone to medical school?
Well, Through the course of my adult life, I have wished a number of times for lots of reasons that I'd gone to medical school, but I also know that I'm happier writing books. I like reading thrillers, but I don't think I'd like
Not
to
your
write
thing.
them. But I am so happy for her.
Yeah, and Jesse, you're just happy that Patterson's not in the number one slot anymore, right?
I mean, I feel bad for Patterson's cadre of writers that he hires to write his books, so I feel bad for them. But also,
Ouch.
yeah, anytime there's a story like this, it makes me feel like I'm not efficient enough with my own time. If like a surgeon
Right,
has time to write a
right,
book, I'm like, well, what am I doing?
I don't want to be that busy, do you? I mean,
No.
What about you? Did you read this story? Do you have any thoughts, or was this a surprise to you, Aprilynne?
This is a surprise to me because I've read several of her books. I find her very hit or miss, and normally very quite hit or quite miss. And I thought that she was one of those self-published authors who writes a lot of books and is like, I will throw all the spaghetti. And I'm shocked to hear that she's a physician, not because of skill or knowledge or anything, but just surely because of time. I'm like, really?
Persistence. Well, as I said, she started at Sourcebook. She's got other publishers now, but she's held on to the ebook rights of everything she's got. So she's still controlling what is probably the largest profit center for her herself, and that's kind of remarkable. All right, news story number 2. Amazon adds identity verification to KDP. Like, finally.
About time.
Yeah, Kindle Direct Publishing, of course, is where most people who are self-publishing or indie publishing or even small and legitimate presses go to upload their books to legitimate. That's so wrong. Other, I should say. Who's the illegitimate ones? No, we're not doing that. But other publishers go to upload their books into Amazon's system. And it used to be pretty much anybody could upload anything, which has led to people uploading books under other people's names, which leads to lawsuits after they finally figure out somebody else has sold 1 million copies under their name, or now people uploading AI-generated books without admitting it, or other kinds of junk. Well, now Amazon is requiring, they're rolling it out slowly, but in pieces they're going to require people to upload photos of some government-issued identification, driver's license, passport, whatever. And if the account holder declines to verify their identity when asked, they will not be able to publish and or the account will be closed. The Amazon's help page now says, and I'm quoting, identity verification is one of many tools for providing authors and publishers with a trustworthy, enjoyable KDP experience and for protecting readers from fraud and abuse. Well, we're all in favor of that. Laura, welcome development or just another hoop you have to jump through when you're uploading your books?
Well, of course, when it applies to you, it's going to feel like a little bit of a pain in the neck. But honestly, authors have been asking for years and years and years. We've been clamoring for Amazon to, quote unquote, do something. And they are doing something. I like to think that this will bring some relief to the system. I really hope that it does most impact the people who shouldn't be there and who are gaming the system and abusing it and taking advantage of it. So my hope is that, yes, this will wind up being a good thing.
Yeah, good. Jesse, you're our tech person. Is this actually going to work, or are people just going to find some work around this like they seem to all the time?
I'd be interested to see what the workaround could be if you could like make a fake driver's license picture using, Photoshop or whatever, and if they would buy that, or if they're going to do actual verification with the information you're giving them. So I guess we'll have to see.
It seems, at that point, if you start uploading fake documents with, clip art photographs of the author or something like that's actual fraud.
That's actual fraud, and it's actual work, which makes me think like the person won't do it anyway.
Might not stop anybody.
I want our listeners to know that I ran both of these news stories by Renee to see if she had any thoughts. She did not. So, as we all know, her love for our publishing news segment runs deep. So,
all right, enough of this. We have 2 superstar writers here waiting to be interviewed. So let's talk to Aprilynne Pike and Kimberly Lemming. right, Aprilynne, Kimberly, welcome back to the podcast. Okay, traditional first question. I'll start with you, Aprilynne. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, and I know I've asked you this once before, so you can use that answer again or come up with your second best piece of advice, your choice. But if you could offer one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, you know what? Since I'm here and teaching a master class, I will advertise my master class and make that part of my advice. He didn't even tell me to do this. So I'm teaching class tomorrow that is the first 3 pages of your first 3 chapters. And part of the point of this workshop is to get you past the first chapter. Because I know writers who will spend so long on that first chapter and they're like, if I make it perfect, then I'll have like the motivation to get on to the rest of it. And I'm like, no, if you try to make it perfect, you'll never move past it. So even though it's the first few pages of the first few chapters, we're going to spend very little time on chapter 1. And we're going to go like, now think about chapter 2. Think about chapter 3. What do the subsequent chapters need to do? So my advice is don't get stuck on chapter 1. Move on. Let yourself write terrible chapter 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s and so on, but just keep writing. You can go back and edit anytime. As long as the words are there, they will be ready to be edited anytime. But if the words are not there, they cannot be edited.
This is so true. Kimberly, how about you? I know you've answered this before too, but for today, if you can offer one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say get as wild and crazy as you want in your first draft. No one's going to see it but you. So who's going to judge it? Make it as insane. Make it set something on fire. Do whatever you want. Because you never know what you're going to want to keep. And if you allow yourself that freedom, you might end up making your story way more dynamic than it would have been at first.
Yeah, absolutely right. Aprilynne, let's start with you, because you have been on a magnificent journey. Did you ever imagine that your first published novel would be a #1 New York Times bestseller?
I did not. I really thought it was going to take at least 2.
Yeah. I was saying, it sounds so egomaniacal to say my first book, but second, that's cool.
I was on a panel one time with Diana Gabaldon, and she is the loveliest person, and she has this very particular way of speaking, and I do a pretty good impression, and I'm not really sure I'm going to do it today, but she essentially said that there's nothing worse than coming out and hitting it big on your very first book, because then you have nowhere to go but down. And then she passed the microphone. Sorry, I should take it away. And then she passed the microphone to me, and I was like, because I was a baby author, you know, I was like 3 weeks out from hitting #1. She didn't know me. I didn't know her. I was like, Diana Gabaldon, that's nice. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know what Outlander was. I found out very quickly when everyone was there to see her and not me. And I was like, so my name is Aprilynne Pike, and my first book just came out and hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. So I guess we're going to see what's going to happen, Diana. But it was super awkward. But it is interesting because there is nowhere to go but down, and that or straight across. You could go straight across, and it does make for a wild journey. And I think that really the most unexpected part was that it did a lot of this after that. There is no point at which it's like, all right, well, now you've hit #1, now you're John Grisham forever, you know? That just doesn't happen. And it never stops being a roller coaster. And I apologize if anyone here is like, as soon as I get published, it will stop being a roller coaster. No, it does not.
That's right.
It never stops being a roller coaster. And part of that is that it's always fun. It's always new. There's always unexpected things, but it's always crazy.
That's right. I like roller coasters most of the time.
No.
No?
But I like the publishing roller coaster. I discovered as an adult, I do not like roller coasters.
You haven't done the Velocicoaster? I mean, you live in Florida. No?
Where's the Velocicoaster?
Universal.
I have not been to Universal. That's a story for another day. We'll talk.
Okay. Kimberly, you have also seen skyrocketing success, rising high on the new and improved and much more accurate USA Today bestseller list. How did you feel when you first saw your name on that list?
I was baffled.
Really?
I was completely baffled because it was a re-release of that book. And I'll be honest, with the first few books when I first started doing this, half the time I was just being petty and trolling people on Twitter. Like, for example, when I first started doing this, people on Twitter were like, I can't believe you put modern slang in your fantasy novel. I'm like, oh, you haven't seen nothing yet. Now book 2 is called That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. You think that's bad? I'm doing dinosaurs and alien next.
Aprilynne, could you tell us, how do you think the business has changed in the 10 or so years since you got started?
So I think that there have been 2 huge title changes. Tidal.
Tidal, right?
I mentioned in my class that I really like discovering homophones, and that's one of them I discovered lately. Tidal, when I moved to the ocean, is not title, which is what you put on your book. Anyway, so 2 of the big title changes have been the move to ebooks and all of the self-publishing that has opened up, and things like the news story that we talked about with Freida McFadden, keeping those ebook rights. All of a sudden, ebook rights are not this thing that your agent throws into a deal to make the publisher feel better. And be like, let's just close this thing. Here's some ebook rights. All of a sudden they are a majority of your sales. They are a huge deal. How much control you have over them is a huge deal. The ability to put ebooks out on your own is a huge deal. It's launched this entirely new section of the publishing industry. Amazing. The second big thing that happened was COVID happened, and all of the editors went home and found out they really don't need to be in the office. And that has opened up a whole bunch of positions for editors who cannot afford to live in New York City, but are amazing. It has opened freelance editors, which of course are needed as the self-publishing industry gets bigger. It has given editors the freedom to move places. My editor moved to Maui. I'm like, oh, yeah. She went from, I was in Arizona at the time, and she went from being 3 hours ahead of me to 3 hours behind me, and that was interesting. But I mean, I love the ability to live wherever I want to and still write books, and I don't see any reason why my editor shouldn't have that opportunity as well. So those, I think, are the 2 really big changes that have had very rippling and lasting effects on authors and editors and agents and prospective writers.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
You are so welcome.
Kimberly, romance has always been huge. We have lots of romance readers, but lately we've had a pulse to that with the addition of Romantasy entering the playing field. Have you leaned into that? And why do you think that we are seeing this extra surge in what was already probably the most popular genre, or at least one of the most popular genres?
I would say it's more just a wave of what normally gets popular right now. A few years ago it was paranormal, now it's romantasy. I just like to have fun in a fantasy setting. So I was like, fantasy's now what we're doing? Excellent. Dragons, werewolves, I'll do it all.
Right.
Thank you for saying that. I totally had a whole conversation with a friend of mine who writes romantasy. She's like, I love it, it's a romantasy. I'm like, I have been writing that for 14 years.
Before they had a cute name.
Right? They hadn't made fetch happen yet. And they have now made fetch happen, and they're like, look, we invented fetch. And I'm like, you did not invent fetch. You just called it something different. So yes, thank you. I feel very validated
I
right
am
now.
so glad you said that, because everyone kept acting like it was new. And I'm like, I've been reading fantasy romance my whole life. Well,
It's not new.
yeah, it's not new at all.
Yeah. But if you got a cute name.
Just a
then you
fancy new
rise
term.
to the-
Yeah.
I do
top of
like the
list.
name. I like the name. The name is great.
Aprilynne, you mentioned your master class. You're actually doing 2 master classes, and you're doing 2 breakout sessions as well. Can you talk about what you're going to be talking about?
Well, you already missed one. I already did one.
Oh, well, what you talked about then in the past
I
tense.
talked about defining your own success, because I am, as I explained to my class, I am having a marketing moment. I am currently working full-time as a marketing writer for a radiology company in Minneapolis, and I am really enjoying it. And I tell you what, the second that publishing decides to pay me more for my books than this company is paying me for my emails and press releases and web copy, I will switch back. But for the moment, they're paying me more to do that, and so I'm doing that, and I'm doing fiction on the side. I am writing a book for a friend. What was the question? That wasn't the question. Oh, defining your own success, because my idea of success is making a living as a writer, and that's not going to be everyone's idea of what success is. So we talked about that this morning, and about all sorts of different ways that you break into the industry, what sort of money you can expect to make in the industry, if that's important to you at all. I'm keynoting this afternoon, and I actually always really love putting together keynote speeches because I always add pictures of my kids and tell interesting stories about myself and what I'm thinking, and I like to talk about myself. Tomorrow I'm teaching a class on plotting, which is actually roughly based on what I learned in Hawaii that I've turned into my own little thing. So you make a little cameo appearance in my slides.
Oh.
Credit where credit is due. And then I'm talking about the first 3 chapters, the first couple of pages of your first 3 chapters and how important those 3 chapters are, because while an agent and editor will only give you 1 chapter, readers will give you 3 if you can really hook them.
Yeah. So Aprilynne is doing that. We're recording this on Sunday of WriterCon. Aprilynne's doing her keynote this afternoon. Kimberly did hers on Friday, and I saw people streaming out of the room with these big smiles on their, and maybe even a few tears. I think I'm not exaggerating when I say you really connected with people. What was the main message you were trying to get across?
That's a great question. I had a whole speech planned, and then I got up on that stage and froze like a deer in headlights.
Well, you must have said something, because I saw people coming out very happy.
Let me just say, at karaoke last night, I had kind of that. Did I even sing the song? I have no memory
Yes,
of it.
you sang the song.
I think it might have been my worst performance ever. I'm spoiled.
Oh, it was
usually,
amazing.
I can't even.
She wore
remember.
leather pants, y'all.
That alone.
Oh, she sang too, but like,
Yeah.
Well, I'm spoiled because, of course, Bill plays piano. So I am accustomed to having a personal accompanist. And so I get a little freaked out when I have a mic in my face and something electronic playing that I have to match. But
Can't tell it to slow down or speed up, right? It is what it is.
with just a glance, like he knows.
I should explain about the leather pants. We were doing the last song from Grease, you know, You're the One That I Want, and I needed a black T-shirt, and I didn't have one, but I had a DuckTales T-shirt that I turned inside out, and that became my black T-shirt for karaoke.
Well, no, I would say my main message is have fun with your books, because that's what I did. I wrote mine not really expecting anyone to read it. I just wanted to take myself on a fun fantasy adventure. And one of the beautiful things is that so many readers connected with that story that it pretty much saved me. Like, I was able to be a full-time author shortly after my first book. So you never know what's going to happen.
That's really amazing. Inspiring, yeah. What does a typical writing day look like for each of you? So, Kimberly, you said now you're writing full-time. That's phenomenal, and I know a lot of people here have that same goal, that same dream. So, and what's your process like?
Well, if I have not screwed up my schedule, which I do often, I will do whatever I want before 9 a.m., but at 9 a.m., I want to be in my desk with my coffee, and it doesn't matter if I write 10 words or maybe a few thousand words. I just want to get in that chair and at least think about what I'm doing until maybe 11 or 12. Then I'll go take a break, a couple hours, and if I feel like it, I'll go back and write again. I normally just write until 5 when my hubby gets home and we'll watch anime or something, have a good time. But on days where I can't really get the words in, I decide that means my brain needs a break, and it's fine to take a week or so off. Go on a walk, go visit your friends, go on a trip, whatever you need to do to get back those creative juices, because you're not going to be able to write constantly all the time, and that's okay. Burnout happens. Take care of yourself so you can get out of that burnout.
Yeah.
Go to a writer's conference so you can get recharged. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
What about you, Aprilynne? What's your process look like? You mentioned that you do some other things and are writing more on the side. So how do you find that writing time now?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and do 2 parts of this because I was, at the height of my career, I had 4 very small children. All of my kids are 6.5 years apart. And so I had a lot of kids, and they were very little, and they need a lot of attention. And I learned how to do something I call writing concentrate, which is that I would think about what I was going to write about the next day all day long, and then I would drop whoever my youngest child was off at preschool. I love preschool. And I would have 4 hours. And I didn't have time to check Twitter. I didn't have time to research on Wikipedia. That was not the time for that. I had to sit down and write words. And so I got really good at writing books 4 hours at a time. But that only works if you are ready to sit down and write, if you've been thinking about things, if you've been going over what you wrote the day before, and you're ready, and you've planned what you're going to write the next day. And I wrote a lot of books 4 hours at a time by marinating during the other times. Now I feel like a spoiled brat because my children can all dress themselves and do their own thing. And so I have a lot more time. They also understand this. And they will wait when that didn't used to be the case. And so now it's when I feel like sitting down and working on whatever story I'm working on, I just get to do it. And it feels so freeing, even though I have another job that I work, and they've got school things, and I've got schedule. It feels so luxurious because it's not this 4 hours that I got so used to doing that I did for probably 6 years straight, this writing concentrate thing. And then it got worse when I was on deadlines, and sometimes I gave up and drove to my mother's house, and I said, we're here to visit, and I'm here to write. So yeah, it feels a lot more leisurely now. I write when I want to, and I write what I want to, and it's delicious.
Yeah,
Also
nice.
inspiring, because we just heard two very different approaches to writing, and they both lead to success. And I think that that is an important message that we like to get across. Whatever works for you can work for you.
As long as you work.
Well, yes.
And get past chapter 1, please.
I'd like to add something to that too. One of the things I notice is that if I get bored during a scene, I will just stop writing for forever. So even if it doesn't make sense, I will just go on a wild, wacky turn just to at least get me to keep writing. For example, yesterday, I had to have a scene where the main character is getting a check over by the doctor. But I got bored, so I'm like, well, what if the doctor's husband came in and started screaming, "You cheated on me, I saw you on the camera." Now I'm interested. Now I keep writing.
I'm interested.
I'm like, when's that one going to be done? That sounds good. That sounds good.
It's even funnier when you realize it's like Furby aliens doing it, so.
Her books are not boring. Would you guys consider yourself pantsers or planners?
Oh, I'm a hardcore planner. I don't start chapter 1 until I know what happens at the end. I don't start book 1 of a series until I know what happens at the end of the series. So I'm hardcore.
Just listening to you talking, I would have guessed that. And now what about you?
I like to pretend that I plot. I will have a very rough draft and maybe like a few scenes. Normally, when I like to write, I just like imagine these characters getting into silly arguments in my head. So my phone is like full of like hundreds of thousands of words of just these random conversations. And then when I actually get to start writing, I'm just like, I feel like this scene needs more dinosaurs, so we're gonna have a brontosaurus smash through a house. So yeah, I'm definitely more of a pantser.
I admit I've never had a moment where I thought this scene needs more dinosaurs, but I think I would like to.
Yeah,
I'm interested.
What are some of the lessons you've learned along your journey? Maybe you didn't know or fully understand when you first started, but now you understand are very important and would be willing to share with the rest of us.
I would say it's important to remember to give yourself breaks. When I first started doing this, I was very overwhelmed with the response I got, so I kept trying to push myself to write books faster and better and faster and faster, and never really gave myself time to relax because I didn't want to disappoint my readers. But I think a year and a half in, I just got so exhausted, I couldn't write for like maybe half a year. So remember to take care of yourself. You don't have to write several books a year. Write as long as it makes you happy, because if it becomes a slog, you're going to want to quit.
Yeah, Aprilynne?
Not all books need to be published, and I think that this is something that I've only learned in the last 5 or 6 years as I've written books that I just loved writing. And I'm like, at the very least, now's not the time. And maybe I'll come back to them. But you know what? I'm really at peace with the idea that maybe I won't. And it took me a long time to get to that point and be like, this isn't the time or the market now. and maybe I'll get back to it, and maybe I won't, and that's okay because I really enjoyed writing this book. So it doesn't always have to be about publication success. Sometimes it's just about trying a new thing, and the way that you try a new thing when you're a writer is by writing it, and sometimes it doesn't go anywhere, and that's okay too.
All right, one last question for both of you. What are you working on next, or what can we expect to see from you next? Aprilynne, you want to go first?
I'm working on two things right now, and one is the sequel to my book Heat, which is about hot dragons, and I don't just mean sexy, but that too. They also run a little hot because they're dragons and they have fire cells naturally.
If you got dragons, you can work in some dinosaurs, can't you?
No? Those are not the same thing, Bill.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, I'm not going to work in dinosaurs to that. I understand how you think that would work, but it would not. You're not my editor. You can't tell me what to do. And then I also have this idea brewing for something completely different that's going to be a suburban mystery, and I'm super excited about it, and it's about moms doing really bizarre things like egg napping and working for the mob and plural marriage and lots of... It's going to be good.
Sounds fun. Kimberly, how about you?
Well, I just finished my final edits for my upcoming novel, I Got Abducted by Aliens and I'm Trapped in a Rom-Com.
That's a long title.
Oh, yeah. Now I'm working on book 2. I punched a king in the face, and now I've been thrown into couples therapy. And on off days, I usually end up working on Made Mishaps book 4. So I usually try to let myself have a few projects, that way I don't get bored.
That's great. Thank you both for being on this podcast, and thank you for being a part of WriterCon 2024. Just a few parting words. I wish you could have been here, and I'm sorry you couldn't join us for WriterCon, but you know what? We'll be back in 2025, Labor Day weekend, with more sensational guests like these two and more informative talks like you all have heard for over 90 sessions during the course of this convention. In the meantime, we are planning the WriterCon 2025 cruise. We're going to Alaska in May this year, next year rather, and of course we'll be back with a small group instruction retreat at Canebrake next summer. You can find information about all that at our website, which of course is writercon.com. 2 other ways to stay informed about what's happening in the writing world. Real quick, let me remind you, WriterCon has a newsletter, and it's free, so why not? I mean, go to Substack, easy to find, substack.com, search for WriterCon, and subscribe. So you'll get all the wonderful articles, including from some of the people who have been at WriterCon this year, and other articles and pieces on breaking issues like AI and what's happening in fiction, what opportunities are out there with publishers and agents and everything else. Go to Substack, search for WriterCon. And if you haven't joined the WriterCon Facebook page yet, please do. I post there almost every day, and a lot of other people do too. And that's where you're going to find the latest breaking news about what's going on in the world of books and writing. All right? Until next time, keep writing, and remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. Do you guys agree with me? See you next time.